today I'm going to show you how to create a pamphlet stitch based on what we were talking about last night for our class. So here are our tools that we'll use for this. And the demo I'm showing you has specific paper size, but again, you can do this sort of any size you'd like. You just cut your paper first. So you'll need a ruler for measuring and cutting or tearing. So this is a cork back. I have my bone folder. These are my little scissors I like for bookmaking because they're very tiny and have nice points. I like using a mechanical pencil. My X-Acto knife with a sharp blade. This is my dissecting needle. My sewing needle, and again, I like to use yarn darners. There's all kinds of book needles specifically. And then I just have some blue embroidery thread here so that there was some color contrast against my other materials so you could see it easily. Embroidery thread works, or there's bookbinders thread specifically. This is a good thickness though in terms of like we were talking about being able to sew with it and not tear your paper. So for this demo I have 4 sheets of content paper or text weight paper. I've folded 2 already. The idea though is here it's easiest if all your papers are the same size. So for this demo I have 6 pieces of paper total. I have 4 of my text weight paper, and this is actually just copy paper. I'm going to set these 2 aside that are already folded. And then you would have possibly, a little bit of a heavier paper for an in sheet, and then a cover paper. And these 2 specifically are like a cardstock weight. And so these are just sort of papers that are readily available. You could use any kind of specialty paper though, so handmade paper, anything with a texture or built-in elements like flowers or anything like that, like we kind of talked about. These are just simple materials for the demo. So your first step will be to decide your final paper measurement, because like I said, you'll want to do that first. So, let's say if I wanted to make a book that was half this size, or maybe even, only 6 inches tall or something, I'd want to cut all my paper first so that it's all the same size as best as possible. And then you're just going to start folding. So the important thing is that you have really crisp creases here on your folio, and you'll fold each piece of paper individually. And so again, that makes a folio. So you want to just line up your edges really neatly, and then you'll use your bone folder to crease them to get them really smooth. So what I'm going to do is fold the 3 pieces I have, left. So I'm just going to use my fingernails a little bit to line up the edges here and make sure I get my corners really lined up. And once I've gotten it, I kind of started with my fingers a little bit, and then I can use my bone folder to just really get a nice crease. And again, you want to kind of, remember that, like we talked about, your paper remembers the marks you make to it. So you want to be strategic. You can jump right in with your bone folder. Oops, that was a little off on that. But that's actually good, because what's nice is you can kind of fix that. So let's say, okay, I was a little off. I just readjust, and then I can just kind of refold that. Okay. So then I just have this one last piece of paper. Sorry, you can see my dog's blanket there in the corner. And this is my cover sheet, and it's a darker paper, so I'm going to want to be a little more careful so I don't scuff the surface. So I'm going to do it with my thumb first, just smoothly, and then I'm just going to use one of these pieces of paper to put over it, and then I'm going to what we call burnish it with my bone folder. Hi, Alice. So that I get a nice crisp edge. So then I have my cover, I have my in sheets, and I have my content pages. So then I'm going to use all of these folios and stack them up to make my signature. So I'm just going to take one and start putting them in beside each other to just align that spine. You can kind of pound on the tail of the book here to stack them up. So this would be a time where you could use clips of some kind to clip it. So you could use clothespins to pin in the papers in place so that it doesn't move when you're dissecting it. But so what you're going to do is you're going to kind of tap the spine so that all of your papers are sort of stacked in there neatly, and then I'm going to tap the bottom. And that way, my signatures, or my folios, excuse me, are all in there really nice to make my signature. Okay. So then once you get those all tapped in, you would put your clips. So the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and get my thread ready. So I am going to, I just take those off. I'm going to find my end here. There we go. And I just can do like about 3 times the length or the height of the book, excuse me. So I just measured that kind of quickly. I just go 1, 2, 3, and then I'll cut it. So if you were going to wax your thread, you would do that now. You would run it through your beeswax. I'm just going to go ahead and thread my needle. There we go. And so what you'll do is you'll have kind of 2 tails here. You're not going to tie a knot or anything, but you'll have one tail that's longer and then one that's shorter. So there's our needle. Set that to the side. So the next thing we're going to do, and I need to grab, okay, so I grabbed my clothespin, excuse me, not a paper clip. So I'm going to just restack this, and then I'm going to just clamp that there, and that way my papers stay in place. So the next step is to measure where I'm going to dissect my holes. And so what I'm showing you today is just a simple 3-hole binding, but you can add additional holes. You just sort of follow the rhythm that I'll show you to sew. So this book we know is 8.5 inches in height. So I'm just going to first find my middle, which will be 4 1/4. And I'm going to mark that, and I'm marking it on the outer part of the spine. I'm just going to mark it with my pencil. Okay. And so then I like to have my other holes kind of equal distance between the two. I just don't want it too close to the edge because sometimes you might trim the edges of your books to get a cleaner edge. So you don't want to go too close and then it's kind of an awkward distance. So today I'm just gonna go, let's see. I'm gonna go an inch and a half from the head of the book and from the tail of the book. So an inch and a half from the head of the book will be here. So it's a little bit of a longer distance here than sometimes you can do. This part is just personal preference, and then I'll do an inch and a half here. Okay, so now I have my 3 holes that I'm going to dissect. And I'm going to leave my clothespin on. So then, this is honestly the hardest part of this bookbinding is just dissecting these holes. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick up my book and I'm going to make sure that my marks are clear. So if you need to remark them, you can on the spine itself. And so I'm just holding it so that my fingers are not directly on the spine. Let me do that so you can see it. So I've sort of straddled it because I'm going to poke it from the outside. And I'm just poking it kind of slowly. But the thing that you're looking for is that it goes through into the inside of your spine on your fold, not to the left or to the right of it or anything. So then I'm going to switch to the end. And all the while I'm kind of making sure that I didn't move it and mess up my little stack. Okay. And then go to my middle one here. And there we go. That one was actually my best one. So the key for me is sometimes just doing it slow enough to make sure I am pushing through at the right spot. So then we have our 3 holes. So now you'll either start on the outside or the inside of your book. If you start on the outside, you can have like a little tails on the outside. If you start on the inside, your tails are on the inside. So I'm going to start on the inside. And I'm just going to start in the middle and pull my needle through. And you can see here I've left a little tail. And then I'm going to go to the right, go through that hole. And this is where you want to work with your movement to like not stress the paper. So you want to always pull and make your thread tight in the same direction that you have sewn. And so with this specific bookbinding, you'll kind of finish that out a lot at the end. So I will pull this way, and then I'm going to go across to the left here and go through this hole. Okay, and so now on the outside here, you have one thread that goes against just the, kind of where you started. And so then you just sort of end where you started here. So I'm going to, again, pull in the direction I sewed, and I'm going to go back through my middle hole, and I'm going to straddle this beginning thread in the middle. So my tail here is on my left, so my needle is going to come up on my right. Okay. And so then I'm just going to pull, because that's in the direction I've sewn, and then I'm gonna just make a double knot. Kind of pulling as I go. Because you want your thread pretty tight. You can take my clothespin off there. So then I'll tie it one more time. And then you can trim this however long you want. I tend to trim it maybe the same length as my sewn thread part. And then I often, I should have done the lighter color on the outside so you can see the thread better. But then here you can see, you know, I have sort of this left to right part, and then my little tails, and then that is on the outside too. Now, if I had started on the outside, this part would be on the outside. And so next I kind of, you know, I can burnish it again a little if I want with my bone folder. You want to be careful not to scuff your paper. So the one other step that you can do then with this kind of book, you get what we call creep on the end. Because we've stacked those folios in to make a signature, the pages creep out. So the next thing you would do could be to trim your edges. And that also gives you then a perfect edge, you know, like maybe the papers, you know, these are even store-bought papers. I didn't even hand cut them, and they could be still a little bit off. So you would want to just measure and then cut it by hand with your X-Acto knife. And there you go.